Do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Grace Linden, and I live in Bow in East London. I grew up in Dalston, and I am currently doing a master's in creative writing at Royal Holloway, and yeah. And I know you from we both worked in the same shop, but now you've gone to Newcastle. Yeah.
Cool.
Shall I read this poem?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got another thing because it kind of came partly from the afterword of this biography of Lorca that I was reading. Maybe I'll read the poem and then I'll read the quote which kind of sort of prompted the poem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called Finish the Nights, the Days, the Hours. I must give up making pictures for the moment. In the green rain outside, there was for a while not thinking. If only it had not been outside. The rain was so many green nerve endings, stammering, unhinged, quite useless. For now I must finish with making pictures. When I closed my eyes, I saw a network of indigo brown caves, dusty and sharp, the smell of blood. Like anyone high on herself, I had secrets, and here was one. Yes, there must be an end to making pictures. The bed was soft and narrow. It was not made up. Perhaps what hurt most was the apparent contingency of the arrangement. Wherever you had gone, I went there to recover you. Yeah, and then this is the afterword of this biography of Lorca by Ian Gibson. And basically, so Lorca's killed at the end of the biography, like everyone knows, but then there's this afterword, which is like 2 pages long, but I'll just read the beginning. Mm-hmm. Which is about this guy who was Lorca's lover at the end, and kind of just they were very, very close. And he's called Rafael Rodriguez Rapun. And so the afterword says, Maria Teresa Leon, the militant communist wife of Rafael Alberti, knew Rafael Rodriguez Rapun well, and about the relationship that existed between him and Lorca. When Colonel González Espinosa's reply to H.G. Wells, which was published in the newspapers and kind of confirmed that Lorca had been killed, because up till that point they didn't know. When his reply to H.G. Wells was published in the Madrid newspapers that October, and it became clear that the poet had indeed been killed, that the appalling rumour was true, she saw Rapun again. Nobody can have suffered the way that quiet lad did on account of his death, she wrote in her memoirs. Finish the nights, the days, the hours. Better to die. And Rapun went off to die in the north. I am convinced of that. After firing his rifle furiously, he allowed himself to be killed. It was his way of recovering Federico. Cipriano Rivas Sharif, who was arrested by the Nazis in France and handed over to Franco, heard a similar version when he was released from prison in 1945. Someone told him that Rapun, who had enlisted voluntarily in the Republican Army once he felt certain that the fascists had killed Federico, jumped out of the trench one day saying that he wanted to die. A few seconds later, he was mown down. Rivas Sharif was never able to verify the truth of the account, which he admitted might be merely a legend, but it was substantially accurate. And then it just goes on to kind of talk about what happened. Yeah. Sorry, it's quite a lot. Maybe I should have told you about it before.
No, it's good. Where did you come across the book?
How did I come across the book? I can't remember exactly. I think I kind of known about Lorca for a long time, but it was always like he was this kind of mythical figure, and I haven't really read that much of his poetry. But then I think I must have found it in a charity shop, or maybe and maybe John found it in a charity shop. And then I was reading it for just ages. I remember like once I left it at the shop and I was like, you need to get it because but I finally finished it and I was like, I just felt really sort of destroyed by it. It was so sad. Yeah, maybe partly because I'd been reading it for so long. It was almost like he'd become a bit of a presence in my life because I'd pick it up and then put it down again, and then it gets to the end and it's like, oh my God.
And then you wrote him a poem.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it was more for this guy, Rafael Rodriguez Rapun, because I don't know, like he's a very minor character in the book in a way because it's so much about Lorca, but then just I don't know, and I'm finding it hard to say maybe that's a bit what the poem is about, because it's a bit like this thing happened and what could I possibly say about it. Like I just really, and I think this is something that I feel a lot about poems at the moment, that I'm really kind of worried about imposing a really strong arrangement on things that happen. I don't want to like force things into a certain shape, but at the same time, you know, like things do have, or you know, like things can have a shape which is quite insistent, and also at the same time it's quite painful to think that things like that happen randomly, and I don't know, that things like both are difficult, imposing a shape on things and also feeling that things don't have a sort of shape that you can make sense of. Does that make sense? What did you think about it when you read it? What thoughts did you have?
That's what I was thinking there now. That the things I thought and then the notes I made, I was like, can I say this now that she's read that?
No, yeah, please say it.
I think because of the way that I write things, I really unfairly put that on everyone else, or I like assume that from everyone else.
Yeah.
So I think I felt surprised there now that it came so much from somebody else, because I had read you so much into it. But I think the thing that I thought about is in all the poems, not just this one, but I felt like, because then you sent me a fourth one separately, and it was there too, that I felt like, I think everything's a conversation. I think they all sounded like conversations, or that they were concerned with conversation. Sometimes I think that all poems are, but then I read one that I think is really bad and I realise that they're not. So I think all good poems are. But they feel like conversations that are about very small, very important things, that somebody in them is trying to take very seriously. And I think the more that I spent time with them, or the more that I read, I felt like a wee world building up around that feeling, that at the same time kind of felt sometimes really sad, and but then sometimes so sad that it was kind of funny. And that was the bit I was like, I can't say that. That's not funny. Do you know what I mean? Does any of that... I
think you're complete... Sorry.
Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, I think you're right about the conversation thing, and I think you're right about things which are small and like trying to take them very seriously. And I think, yeah. And what was the other thing that you said about a world which is kind of like sad, but so sad that it's funny?
Yeah.
I think I'm just trying to think of all those three things together. Maybe start at the beginning with the conversations. Yeah, I agree with you. I think like recently I stopped writing for a long time, and I felt really bad about that. And I think, but it was hard to tell, like, did I feel bad because I'd stopped writing, or did I stop writing because I felt bad?
Yeah.
And I think it was partly like feeling that I wasn't talking to anyone, or I couldn't write these poems because I couldn't imagine them being received in a way which was like understanding. Yeah. And then do you remember that poem that I think I even put it up on my Instagram story, the one which is kind of addressed to John?
Yeah, I love that.
I think that was the first poem that I wrote after this long period, because like maybe it was absolutely because John had been like just like really on my case about it, and he was like, you need to write something. And I was like, I can't, and he was like, do it. And that made me feel again like there was the possibility of a conversation, I guess. And then yeah, like small things, maybe that's part of it as well, because they're just small things, and why would anyone be interested or try to understand them? Because, you know, but I often find them like really, really important. Like there are things that stick in my head. I have been thinking recently a lot about kind of humor and laughing about things, and I was thinking about wanting to write a poem which is like really sad jokes.
Yeah.
They're all kind of like structured like jokes, but they're just really sad. Because jokes are all, I always feel like when you make a joke, you kind of you kind of construct an arrangement of things, and then you're like, nah, and you destroy it. And I kind of, yeah, I quite like that, but I also feel like it's probably not good that I like it. I don't know.
I feel like that's what Ivor Cutler does. Do you like him?
I heard about him, and I've seen some of his pictures, but I haven't like properly looked at it. Can you? Yeah.
Yeah, you should. I thought of him when I was reading your PDF. There's a really great, I think it's the name of a documentary about him as well. He has a poem called Looking for the Truth with a Pen. And on YouTube there's a really good video of him reading it. It's like an old BBC video. It's like, I also think if you type in Ivor Cutler, it's one of the first things that comes up.
Yeah.
But he does a really similar thing as well, of like pulling out all the smallest bits of a story that feels kind of big, and really focusing on them and taking them very seriously in a way that's sad and funny. And I feel like he does the joke thing that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has a series as well called like, I think it was like originally like a radio type, like a radio play type thing, that was like, I'm gonna forget the name of it exactly, but it's like not lessons, like tales from a Scotch sitting room or something. And it's like kind of like his readings always are, like soft music in the background and him reading, and it's kind of rambly, detailed descriptions of a living room.
Yeah. Oh,
I think you'd love it, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into this.
I think you'd think it was really funny.
One here called Life in a Scotch Sitting Room. Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. The one. Tales. Do you want to talk about the second one?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Because I think this one makes me think of it most?
Yeah. This one doesn't have a title yet. I was so worried when I sent it to you that you would be like, can't believe you, I don't know why I got so worried that you were going to be like, can't believe you stole what I said.
No.
Um,
When I received it, it was like, I can't believe you put me in a poem.
Okay, I'll read it. That morning in the shop, I was imagining a world without butter. In that world, people sat around with their hands loose and empty on their laps saying, I can't believe butter doesn't exist. In primary school, the head teacher told a story of some frogs trapped in a large bowl of milk. One by one, the frogs grow tired from swimming, slip into the milk, and drown. But one frog keeps swimming, and with its kicking legs churns the milk into cream and the cream into butter. This hard-working frog is then able to climb from the firm surface out of the bowl and escape. I wonder still if it would work out like that for the churning frog. Wouldn't the poor frog find, as she swam in circles, that the milk became stiffer and closer, clagging and weighing down her twitching legs? And even if she succeeded in making butter, wouldn't she find herself as stuck in the butter as she was immersed in the milk? I'm only asking. I was sitting there with Niamh behind the counter made of stacked blocks of butter. She said in a sad sort of way, in those days it felt like you could email anyone anything. But the work finds you out as you sit there, very high up, watching the world tumble away like a ball of wool. As we talked, we were hard at work, picking off stray threads with our greasy canary yellow fingers.
That's the one that I first thought of Ivor Cutler, and I thought you should listen to him. Sometimes they feel quite absurd. This one I feel like I can point it. I like the way that, even though I said before that I think these things, the poems really feel like they come from you. You know that I think lots of people write lots of poems, and lots of the time I kind of feel like they could all swap over and nobody would know or something, like, or what am I trying to say? Lots of times I just don't think that people have a specific voice, and I really think you do. I think I would know that this came from you. And I think that's what was fun to read, because I think when we met and were getting to know each other at work, I didn't read any of your poems. I knew that you wrote poems, but I didn't know any of them. And I think that was what was so fun when you sent me the poems. Because I was like, oh, cool, they sound like Grace. What is that sound? That sound is...
Wait, for me?
Yeah. No, well...
someone came to the door. I think it was the postman. Postperson.
Postperson.
Yeah. That makes me really happy to hear you say that. And at the same time, it reminds me of being on Art Foundation and this girl, like, I don't know, I just felt really, she like came to look at the work that I was doing in my space, and she was like, whatever work you do, you can just tell that it's you. And I was like, I felt kind of like, I just like didn't know what to say, because I was like, oh my God, because it felt kind of nice, but also like a trap, like, like, oh, what if I wanted to write something like someone else? I don't know.
Yeah. I think before we were recording, and you said about when you send people poems and they don't know what they say back. I think sometimes that can be what that is. I think sometimes when somebody's voice is so strong or something, I think people can feel a bit stuck outside of it or something.
Yeah, definitely. or kind of like,
But
also like they don't need to say anything. Like the positive side of that is like, oh, you're just getting on with who you are or what you do, and you don't need. It doesn't feel like, yeah.
I think I really, I like the way that it's not just necessarily memories. Which I feel like these kind of poems, and I mean I've wrote these kind of poems that are definitely just like, one time I did, and like every line of it is just true and plays out in the order that it happened and is said by the people that said it. I think whatever the voice or the quality or whatever it is that I'm thinking about or trying to describe, I think couldn't do that, maybe.
Yeah.
Because
can you explain a bit?
It feels important that you're like never just thinking about one thing or one experience, or they never feel as like much of a straight line as that, maybe, whenever they seem to actually come from you or something. I think it's funny that the first one feel like sounds way more straight, and then you were like, and I read this book, and then it made me think of this. But where this one just feels from your head.
Yeah, I definitely see what you mean. Where it's like, it's not like I've finished thinking about it.
No.
It's not like the poem is like the conclusion to a process. It's kind of like, oh, I need to write this, and like this one, I was much more like, no, I don't know. I think I was still thinking a lot about. Yeah, I think the first one was also a way of thinking through something, but this one was definitely like, I'm thinking through this, but I really don't. I don't have any. I don't have any answers to it. I can't. Like it's just this ongoing thing that I'm thinking and feeling, and it helps to write the poem, but it doesn't conclude anything. I guess. Yeah. Although with this, it kind of, part of it started with the first bit about saying I can't believe butter doesn't exist. I did, maybe this is a bit what you're talking about as well. I did genuinely think that, imagine that, and I was like sitting around laughing at myself for ages before I wrote it down. Like I kind of genuinely found myself really funny when I wrote that. Yeah.
That I think this one feels the most like your joke analogy as well, like building everything up to kind of just tear it down, and then laugh at it.
Yeah.
I really think, when I read it, I was trying to think about it at the same time, because I want to ask you about when you started writing poems, and so I was thinking about it, and then I had this memory of learning about that Carlos Williams poem about the plums, and having like a complete penny drop moment where I was like, oh my god, so your note can just be a poem. And like literally it was like somebody just had a switch that I just thought it was hilarious that, and I don't know the ins and outs of him writing that poem, but I really just thought it was the funniest thing in the world that he might have wrote a note for somebody and then called it a poem. And I think that in me writing things and me reading things, whatever that excitement about that sentiment just hasn't gone away at all. So that part of me, when I read this poem, was like, oh, wow. And I was trying to think about that light switch moment, and thinking about, well, what came before that? Because obviously I knew poems existed before that, but what did I think they were? And then I had these horrible memories of learning about Siegfried Sassoon and all that, not in a disrespectful way. But I think before that, maybe I just thought poetry was about war all the time. What do you think about that?
I really enjoyed listening to that.
Which I think is just like also going through the motions of like, what parts of that can I say out loud? What parts can't? But I was like, it's definitely just the trajectory of somebody who isn't that committed to school.
But I think that's great. Yeah, I can't remember like any kind of moment like that. But I really like it. Like I wish that I'd had a moment like that.
Well, I might have just made it up as well, you know. But
when did I start writing poems? I can't remember. I think I don't know. I think now I feel really lame because I feel like I did start writing poems with this kind of like really really like weird pretentious sense of like I'm a writer and you know that. Like a kind of teenager kind of self-important, like I'm writing a poem and this is how you can tell it's a poem because it has lots of serious feelings in it, and you know like a bit like what you said about poetry is just about just about war or something. It's like this is very serious.
This is my war.
I think
I love that. I think it felt, I mean, equal parts like lame and important to ask you about that, because I felt like there's parts of them answers that don't go away for people, I think. So I think these like very small things that somebody is trying to take very seriously, I can imagine is like just as present in like 13-year-old Grace as well. You know, it's like in a really nice
I see that. But I think and it kind of, that's helpful because I was also thinking about when I was at university and there was like this punishing sort of like quite horrible schedule of writing maybe like 1 or 2 essays per week. And I would also just like I wrote some poems then because they were like weird sort of like overflow poems because I was doing all this writing and lots of the stuff I said didn't mean that much to me, but there was lots happening and lots that I was reading that meant a lot to me, and then like these little poems kind of happened less self-consciously because it was like there are these other things, small things, which I need to say or else I'll go a bit mad.
When I was wee, my mummy was a childminder, so she used to have all these magazines and books around that were like about teaching children or children growing up and stuff, and I used to look through them sometimes, and one of them there was like about writing poems or writing with children, and then there was like an example one that was like a take on Monday's child is whatever Tuesday's child is, and it was really mean and it was really funny and it was really horrible about all these children, and I think it might have been a joke for like the adults that were reading the magazine, and I thought this is so hilarious, and then I wrote it out in my own handwriting and I decorated it, and I really proudly took it to my granny's house and I was like, look at this poem I wrote. And I remember thinking, that is so cool that somebody wrote that. What if I wrote that? And then I wrote it out and everyone was like, Niamh, did you write that? And all the adults were laughing and everybody loved it. In retrospect, maybe people realised that I didn't write it and I just believed it. Like, what is that thing in your poem? Like, somebody high on herself. I was in it. I really believed it. And my granny stuck it up on the wall and everything. I just let people believe I wrote it.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I think people might have knew.
This changes everything. I just don't know. You know,
Nothing.
I'm just struggling.
Nothing is mine.
Yeah, I don't think I would have done that when I was a child, but I really respect that you did. I think I was really I was a very kind of hyper conscious of being very good and doing the right thing kind of child.
Mm.
I don't know. Do you ever feel because when I read your poem, some of it, you know, it takes from things that other people say and you're in lots of them and stuff, but do you ever think of it like that, kind of properly stealing or deceiving people, you know, in those kind of bad terms? Do you ever think of it like that?
Totally. I think some of the best stuff I ever wrote, I would never repeat now or something. And it all I wrote them all maybe in the first year of university, where I started. I mean, I think I had always been writing wee bits and pieces, but in the way that I think everybody could probably write poems, you know, or that everybody is probably writing poems, and then in first year I was like, oh no, what if I started doing it more, doing it this way, or what if I read them out and told them to people, and then there was a wee period where I was like, oh my god, I could just say anything, I could just do anything, and I write these really outlandish kind of true stories or something, and I think that they were funny and they probably were good, but I could never. Over time, I realised that it was wrong or something. It felt like stealing, or parts of them felt inappropriate, or maybe it was only one or two things that if I think back to them now, I'm like, oh, that was just theft. That was awful. I shouldn't have said that. And I just never told anybody that I was doing it. And if people were there for the performance, they were, and if they weren't, then kind of tough shit. I didn't do them anywhere else, do you know? But then I think the more you know, the more you have a filter or a lens that things go through or something. And I think at the time I probably just didn't know very much, so I didn't have the tools to be critical about it. I probably was critical in other ways, but my theft filter wasn't very good.
Yeah, which feels like kind of good and also sad at the same time. I don't know, you kind of lost something. I often think that, looking back at being it's kind of funny because obviously we're not that old, but looking back, I think that's partly why what you said about being able to email anyone anything really hit me. Because I was it felt like that weird feeling of suddenly being quite old, not in, you know, but in a very particular way, which is kind of I feel now there are things that I just shouldn't do, or
have to take responsibility for.
Sorry?
Have to take responsibility for. No?
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways, sometimes for me it feels oh no, I'm a real person now, you know, I actually exist, and that's that's kind of nice, but it's also you know, there's so much that you can't do if you're a real person.
I felt really sad when I read The Frogs.
Yeah, the frogs are so sad. I think, it's again that thing of, and I really strongly associate this with with like working, not like nice working, like, I don't know, writing things or making things, but working, like turning up for work and doing work, kind of work. This kind of thing of, yeah, you're suddenly which is the really, well, I don't know, suddenly because you need to turn up for this thing and you have this responsibility and you're being paid for this thing, it's like a way of being a real person that I really don't get on with.
Yeah.
Which is maybe where the sad part comes in.
What do you mean you don't get on with it?
I don't know, really. I kind of wonder if anyone gets on with it. There is this sense of feeling a bit trapped, I guess. And feeling kind of, in a way, happy to have a job and happy to get money for doing things, but then also it's like suddenly you have to be a part of the world which isn't your own, maybe. You're just a small piece of a world that you didn't have any input in making, and you didn't really ask for it either. Like the story is like, this part of why the story's weird is because, you know, why did the frogs end up in a bowl of milk? Like, who the fuck's putting frogs in a bowl of milk? Should I read the last poem?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So this came from this fragment by this archaic Greek poet that I'd had in my head for ages. I think I just read it one time at university and I was like, wow, that's so cool. I'm going to use that sometime. And then, I don't know, it's just been in my head for ages. And then in the workshop for my course, we were asked to bring in an object, and then we had to kind of not write a poem, but let the poem be be disturbed by the object. It was very vague, like I didn't really get it. But I wanted to write this poem, which was like where you could see exactly where it came from. You know, like it was this feeling that I always had when I was doing maths at school, where I would like come up with the answer, and then it would be like, no, you have to go back and show you're working.
Yeah,
and I'd be like, I don't want to do that.
That's like
I got the
exactly
answer, isn't that enough?
what I thought of the more I looked at it.
Sorry?
That's exactly what I thought of the more I looked at it. I thought about showing you're working out.
Yeah. Okay. So, Anacreon fragment 385. Ek potamu paner come panta ferusa lampra. And then this is a kind of list of the words in it and what the dictionary says about them. Ek, of motion, out of, forth from, to denote change from one place or condition to another. Of position, outside, beyond, with verbs signifying to hang or fasten. Potamos, a river, stream. Pass, Latin, omnis, all when used of many, when of one only, all the whole. Epanerchome, to go up, to return. Pharaoh, to bear or carry a load, Homeric, Attic, of a woman with child. To bear, endure, suffer, to bring, fetch. To bring, offer, present. To bring, produce, work, cause. To pay something, due or owing. To carry in the mouth, i.e. to speak much of. Lampros, of white objects, bright. Of water, clear, limpid. Of the voice, clear, sonorous, distinct. Metaphorically of vigorous action, lampros animos, a keen wind. From river I come bearing bright things up from the river I return with, the washing all clean. Out of a river I climb bringing each piece of clear water no longer in the river but shining all over. Here, the ardent white things of the river, dim, then beaming, sheeny, then rough, then. Running late, I carry in my mouth words I suffer, I owe, plain stuff from a river hanging. A bend in the river, fluttering light, where one day I may take my work and drown it.
That's so good. I love you reading that more than I loved reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can, yeah. I liked me reading it more than I liked writing.
What a difficult way to write a poem, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's really good, and I really enjoyed it. But I definitely find it difficult, and like chewed on it for a long time.
Yeah. How do you mean? Yeah, I see what you mean, but it's funny for me. This is like the easier way to write a poem because it feels a lot less like I have to drag up stuff without any help from inside, if that makes any sense. Like, it's like you can kind of gather all these ingredients and kind of put them together, and it's a bit more just impersonal, I suppose. But do you think that makes it, yeah, what do you mean when you say it's difficult?
I don't speak Greek. Is the first part. I think I'm really, maybe just my education, etc. I'm really also just not used to reading like Latin origins or things like this. Like I think maybe that is, as well as like a thing to read, is a tone or something that I'm not used to tapping into. So I think it just felt like jarring at first. I just switched gears into one that I don't usually drive in. Maybe. It's like, what is the end of that analogy?
Yeah, I get that.
You know, but just maybe like a bit unfair, I think. But
yeah, it's kind of unfair, but it's also really fair.
Yeah, I thought about have you heard of that Alan Moore book, Jerusalem? Do you know that?
No. Alan Moore.
Yeah, he is like most famous for doing Watchmen and things like this.
Yeah.
He wrote this really long book called Jerusalem. That's really good. It's like 3 books in one. It's a really long, detailed story, or like lots of stories, like interconnected, kind of like a layering of lives. It talks about like the living and ghosts of the dead in working class Northampton. And there's like a whole chapter of the book that's written in a language that he made up.
Yeah.
When he also, I'm not saying that you made Greek and Latin up, but when he's talking about it, he says that, well, one, he says that he did it because he just had this urge for every 2 words that he wanted to write. He just had this urge to smash them together and make a 3rd one, and then just write a chapter out of that. There's a good interview with Stuart Lee where he's trying to ask him about it, and he talks about how he did it in another book, but he did it the whole first chapter. So the whole first chapter was like written in this language that he just totally made up. And Stuart Lee's asking him why he done it, and he said, to keep cunts out of my book. And then he says, well, no. And he talks about this thing called literary difficulty, which I'd never heard about before, where he says you deliberately sacrifice a certain degree of your audience. Like, you accept that you're going to alienate some people, but the ones who remain will be forced to engage with it on like a deeper level. or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I find it like really troubling at the same time, because
Yeah,
I
I
feel
feel
like
confused about it.
Sorry. I feel like I've kind of missed something, which is like so when I learned when I learned Latin, it was not at my it was outside school, because I kind of took it up as being tutored in it, and it was kind of like this really fun thing, because it was like a secret language, and that's how I engaged with it for ages. And I think it's sort of still a big part of how I engage with Greek and Latin. But the thing that I feel like I've forgotten, and that I shouldn't have forgotten, is like how these aren't secret languages. Like you said, like I didn't make these up. They don't belong to me, and actually they belong to a really like big and horrible world of, I don't know, like exploiting people and making people feel stupid, and snobbery, and all this like horrible stuff. And I feel almost bad. I feel really bad at the idea that like using them in the way that I've used it in this poem kind of invokes that as well without meaning it. Because
But it sort of doesn't as well.
Yeah.
Like shame shouldn't stop anybody using another language,
Yeah.
Because at the same time, I also had some like, if you got him, smoke him kind of thing. I thought, yeah, totally, cool. I thought, yeah, right, like,
Yeah.
and it would be such a different thing if it wasn't all the definitions and how they're interconnected and used to give context for like what they might mean.
Yeah.
In the wee story at the end.
Yeah.
I kind of had even though I thought about all of that stuff, I kind of had the opposite feeling where I was like, oh no, it's totally generous. You've given me all the tools to think about your story.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I kind of wanted to do that as well, because it would have been, I don't know, like there's something a bit like the kind of the snobbery and making people feel stupid about classics and Latin and Greek is kind of like, like I just feel like it's in films and books and stuff where someone will say a Latin phrase and it's not to say anything except I know this and you don't, kind of thing.
Right.
It's like these languages which are so often used to not say anything except to kind of hold them over people. And I think when I was studying them at uni, that was like the horrible struggle of it in a way as well, because like, and I'm sure this is true of lots of people who study classics, like they meant a lot to me, in my own kind of like weird and probably not often correct or accurate, or like, like I was never that good at ancient Greek, for instance. Like they meant a lot to me, but then I was suddenly in this place where that really didn't matter. Like no one really gave a shit how I felt or imagined, or like that kind of relationship to the languages.
It's so cool how much you're able to do. The difference between the three poems is so nice.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear you say that as well, because that's another thing I feel quite weird about. I'm like, these are so yeah, they're quite different, aren't they? But then I think that also comes from like, it just also comes from holding off quite a lot from writing things quite often, and being like, no, I need to wait until I have a proper reason to write this. Which I think, yeah, like I definitely felt when I was reading your poems as well, that it was kind of like, you've definitely written these because you felt like you needed to write them. Do you think that's true?
Maybe. Or maybe it's closer to, I've felt like I either have said it or would say it. I think it's totally related to saying stuff out loud, or like conversation as like a thing that people can hear.
I'm trying to understand. So it's not like, it's almost like they already exist even before you've written them down.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's a lot better way of saying it than like, I need to write this, or I need to write this. Yeah, they already exist before you've written them down.